a football podcast for football fans by football guys. Welcome to the Endzone Experts.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Endzone Experts. My name's Chris Knowles. This is my co-host, David Robin. Tonight, we have a pretty special guest here, Timothy Jones from State of the Saints, part of Bleacher Report. Timothy, how are you, man?
Man, I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, for sure, man. We obviously are going to talk about some Saints news, rumors. We're going to get right into it. Lot of rumors going around about Taysom Hill possibly switching, maybe possibly going to the Broncos. Dave, Tim, what y'all think, man?
I guess, Tim, what I'd want to ask is, me and Chris, we've probably beat this topic to death about Taysom Hill, and we talk about the post-June 1st cuts, having only two options to go there. I guess what I want to ask you is, and I'm not so sure he would be my guy to use as that cut or maybe a restructure. I mean, I don't know where you view it at. You know, I know there's some other guys that's aging on this roster that could save us some cap money after the June 1st cut. Would you go that route with Taysom, or you think he's got another year or two in him?
Yeah, I think he does have a year or two in him, but that's the reason I feel like they need to let him go. You know, I think the Saints' biggest issue is they kept some of these players too long. I mean, if you look at the business structure of the National Football League, you know, there's this old saying, getting rid of a player a year too early than a year too late, right? Mm-hmm. And I think they still will be having this conversation, even if Taysom Hill didn't get hurt. I just think that Taysom Hill is a special player, and it takes a special type of play caller to be able to utilize his skill set. They found that in Clint Kubiak, who is no longer with the team. What you're asking for is for Kellen Moore to do something that he doesn't normally do. You know, so I think that it's more than likely that he will end up getting cut. I think that would be the issue, even if Taysom Hill finished out the entire season. This is a 35-year-old Swiss Army knife that's going to be 36 at the beginning of the season. Mm-hmm. And I think we all have emotional connections to Taysom because he brings that energy. Like he has been that spark for the New Orleans Saints. I can think about countless times where Taysom Hill, if it wasn't for him, the Saints would have lost the game. Most recently, the game versus the Cleveland Browns. I think the game versus the Minnesota Vikings when they were in a wild card round, a lot of people felt like he should have played the game. He played better than Drew Brees that day.
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is, like, all things must come to an end. And, you know, I just think that a lot of Saints fans don't want to have this conversation because of their emotional connection. But sometimes you got to remove that emotional connection away if we're talking about business and the advancement of your football team.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that take, hands down. I have been saying that for a long time now. I think the Saints organization has attached itself to a lot of these older players, and I know they're fan favorites, but it's just time to go, man. I mean, not only is Hill a little bit, no pun intended, over the hill, but he's also $17 million in cap, I believe this year.
Yeah, I think if you cut him after June 1st, you save, I think it's $10 million or so. So I mean, hey, they need all they can get, you know, at the current state of where they're at, you know.
Yeah, I was just going to say this. I mean, the way I feel has nothing to do with how I feel about Taysom Hill as a player. I mean, I would love for Taysom Hill to continue his career with the New Orleans Saints. I mean, he's going to the Ring of Honor. You know, and the way that he's played throughout the years, you can make an argument to say that they should consider him. I ain't saying like first ballot or something, but like down the line, because there's a lot of football players that are playing right now that are teams have found a position because of Taysom Hill. There are players out there right now that get utilized in a certain way because the teams have saw that Taysom Hill utilized, you know, the Saints utilized his skill set a certain way. So I think that he definitely is a Saint all-time great, but all things must come to an end.
I agree.
You're kind of like a revolutionary talent, man. You don't see, you know, we've never seen this before, you know.
Let me ask both of y'all this. If he is cut or traded, where are his likely destinations? And I know everyone's going to. I know Denver's going to be obviously the obvious one, but other than
betting
Denver,
odds, what is that betting odds on Denver, man? It would be something like minus like 1,000 or something, right? I mean, it would be, I think, pretty one-sided there. I mean, I think I would have to buy the Sunday ticket package, guys, if he went to Denver. I really would. I'd have to see it one more time. I don't know why. I mean, look, I root for my Saints every Sunday, but I would have to witness that once again. Sean Payton getting Taysom Hill. I mean, I would have to think he'd be the first guy in line. I don't know, Tim, what you think?
Two teams, the Denver Broncos or the Seattle Seahawks. I look at the Seattle Seahawks. They got Kenneth Walker, but there's a question about Zach Charbonnet, his backup, right? We know that Kenneth Walker is extremely talented as a running back. I mean, Taysom Hill could be that 1-2 punch. His relationship with Clint Kubiak showed that he can utilize him in a special way. So I can see him in Seattle, but I think that if it came down to it, he'll choose Sean Payton. Like, look, make no mistake about it. Taysom Hill is a rich man and is able to take care of his two children because of Sean Payton. Because Sean Payton is a mastermind. He wasn't even looking for Taysom Hill and just so happened to be looking for, I think, Christian McCaffrey's brother. And Taysom Hill just flashed, off the screen, and he signed him to the Saints, and the rest is history. So I think that Taysom will probably look at it like he forever indebted to Sean Payton. So let's go ahead and try to do this thing again. But those are the two teams that I would say that would be a likely landing spot for him.
Let me ask y'all this: what about Kansas City? Any possibility in the Chiefs if Kelsey were to retire?
Maybe nasty, I think. I mean,
that's a good spot. I mean, we know Andy Reid would put him in the right position to succeed.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. I mean, going to the AFC West where Sean Payton is.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
It feels like you just kind of like a little bit of a slap in the face. And like you said, the relationship he has with Sean, it just feels
like, what? You went there? Like,
and Denver could use a little jolt on offense. I mean, look, their defense was ridiculous this year. I mean, they were, they came out of nowhere with that defense. And, offensively, they could use a few weapons. I mean, I know, Cortland Sutton's still there. They're still trying to figure out that running game. And I mean, Taysom would immediately bolster, a few areas on that offense,
Yeah, I agree.
So both of y'all are 100% in agreement. It's Denver.
I like the Seattle thing, though, with Kenneth Walker and the whole thing out there. And plus, I mean, he could take, it might even work. He did it with an aging Drew Brees. I mean, look, Geno's not a spring chicken anymore either out there. So, I mean, he could definitely help Geno, maybe reduce a few snaps here and there.
Yep.
Okay. So let me ask y'all this: now that we're touching on the Taysom Hill news, and how does that look like with obviously the new head coach Kellen Moore? I mean, is there any opportunity that Kellen Moore finds use for him? I mean, I know that's kind of a crazy question. I know there is use for him, but can Kellen Moore, keep going with Hill, or do you think that's they're going to move on, no doubt, because of Kellen Moore? I should ask.
I would say that they're probably going to move on. I think that maybe if Taysom Hill was 26 instead of 36, I think we'll be having a different conversation. Like you try to find a way to utilize a youthful guy in his skill set. But I look at Kellen Moore and also just the hiring of Kellen Moore. I just think that it's just the Saints letting the fan base and the sports world know that they're turning a page. The Sean Payton, Drew Brees era is officially in the books. I mean, it was a great moment in time. I mean, it gave a lot of Saints fans pride and gave them a level of happiness they never really experienced. I mean, I grew up in the 90s where the Saints were terrible. So to see them actually reach their full potential, I mean, it was fun to watch. But just like you found Sean Payton, a guy who got his play calling duties taken away from him, was a Bill Parcells disciple that nobody knew. People had to go online and, I don't think Wikipedia was out during that time, but they had to figure out who he was.
Yeah.
And you go from that to at least who Kellen Moore is. I mean, through his association with the Cowboys. But I just think that it's a good look. And I just think that, Taysom Hill kind of represents that. Taysom Hill is the Swiss Army knife. He's the fan favorite. And, I just think that Kellen Moore has a identity and a plan that he wants to utilize. And I don't know if Taysom Hill is a part of it.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. And I'll tell you, I've wrestled guys back and forth in my head with the idea, I'm like, okay, hey, we're going to probably go in the direction of a younger quarterback, it
Mm-hmm.
appears. And I said to myself, hey, Taysom would be, an offense that's kind of rebuilding itself a little bit. Taysom would be a good fixture. He could help in so many ways, from blocking to catching passes, throwing the occasional pass, and in the run game.
Right.
And I said, hey, that would be great for, whoever the new guy is, if Derek Carr is indeed gone. But then again, like you said, Kellen Moore, he's trying to build something for the future. This isn't just for 2025.
Right.
And I mean, does Taysom Hill really, look, you can take your lumps this year, but you're developing an offense you want to build for years to come. And if Taysom, if he only has 1 year or two, that's not really a long-term solution to what he's trying to do,
Yeah.
Yeah. How much control do you guys think Kellen Moore is going to have on this roster?
I hope a lot.
I mean,
man.
how much do you really think he can implement like his players, knowing what we know, kind of with Mickey Loomis? I mean,
he walked into a tough situation. I mean, we all know that. I worry about draft day. I don't know about you guys. I mean, I'm just kind of interested on where is he at in terms of that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I know he's going to obviously have input, but I mean, would Mickey and company, would they give up the reins, you think, guys, or what? I mean, you think that it's going to be Kellen's show and future defensive coordinator, future OC, are these the ones making the call here, and other guys going to take a step back, or what?
Well, I think that they're going to give him the leeway. I think that he's going to be in charge of the coaching staff. I mean, Mickey Loomis has already said that, and also the decision making. He's not going to intervene, even when it comes to maybe some of those fan favorites, which I think that you have to do that. I mean, we look, everybody knows how tough this process was, even for the Saints to be able to get a coach with any type of credibility. I mean, to me, they were kind of lucky to get a Kellen Moore. He wasn't their first choice. Like, everybody knows that, Mickey Loomis can go to the press conference and say he was waiting for Philly to finish, but that's not the truth. I mean, they looked at other guys, and if Kellen Moore ends up becoming a successful coach, they kind of fell into that category. So I think that in that case, you got to be able to be a little bit more lenient. Like, so if he wants to come in and wants to have control when it comes to his coaching staff and wants to be able to be a part of the process, I think you got to let him. I mean, and also it's important because you can't go into the draft process thinking, okay, we're going to do the same old New Orleans Saints type style where we get those 6'7" defensive linemen with long wingspan.
Amen.
You know what I'm saying?
Amen.
So, I mean, he might want some hybrids, right? He might want some guys like that resemble that of a Nolan Smith, a Matthew Judon, some of the smaller guys that are hybrid guys, but that can get to the quarterback. So you got to be able to allow him to be able to accompany you throughout the process. And, I think the Saints, to be honest with you, have done a really good job with drafting players. I know it doesn't sound that way, but it's the truth. The problem is those players go to other teams and they live up to that potential. So,
we kicked all that dead money down the road, and before you know it, you get these balloon contracts that happen at the worst of times, and you can't re-sign Trey Hendrickson or Zach Bond was, we could all beat our heads about that. But I mean, there were so many guys that walked out the door, like you said.
Right.
Yeah. Let me ask you this too, Timothy. I want to ask this. Do you think in this draft, is it more pivotal for the Saints to go for skill positions instead of that same traditional 6'2" defensive tackle? You know what I'm saying? The defensive tackle, the guards. I've kind of found that this is kind of the draft where they do need to go more skill positions, but I just want to know what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there was a great debate like in history between Al Davis and John Madden. They say, how do you build a team, right? And Al Davis believed that you should build a team through guys that have, skill position guys, right? The fast guys, the speedy guys, And John Madden, he felt like you need to build through the trenches. I mean, look, the reality is, regardless of what the Saints do, they're going to have to build up this offensive line. Like, you got a really good, solid offensive lineman in Tallahassee Fuaga. Trevor Penny, like, he showed improvement, but I still don't think he's a finished product. And you have Cesar Ruiz and Eric McCoy. Eric McCoy, he's a mainstay to me, but still a lot of question marks with Cesar Ruiz. And then you got that left guard position. To me, I think they need to beef up this offensive line and improve that. Because regardless if you want to roll with Derek Carr or Spencer Rattler, they're going to need some help. And it's going to need to be accompanied by a running game if you're going to have some success at the quarterback position. So to me, I just think that you need to fix the trenches. I mean, offensively and defensively. I mean, they couldn't stop a nosebleed when it comes to like the defensive line, like with the interior. Like teams would just run all up and through there. So I think you need to fix those issues. I know it's not the most the sexiest pick. Everybody wants to see that, McMillan. Everybody wants to see T-Mac out of Arizona, or they want to see Travis Hunter. Like those are great, talented guys, but man, sometimes you got to go with the boring pick if that means that you're going to have sustainable success. So I would say, man, fix those trenches, especially like if McMillan is not going to be there and Travis Hunter is definitely not going to be there. So you might as well roll with the trenches and try to improve your offensive line or defensive line so you can have some levels of success on each side of the football.
Yeah. I agree, man. Like you said, the Tampa fans, I'm sure years ago weren't just going nuts when they got Vita Vea, but look at how that worked out. You know what I'm saying? It's like if it feels like you said, the run defense was so terrible last year, man. It feels like I don't know if that's something you can address. I mean, like I said, we're our limited free agency situation that we have. I mean, man, I would love to go get somebody, especially if we go to a 3-4. I know there's talks about Staley, possibly, coming here, but I mean, it feels like we do need that help in the trenches more than anything. It feels like you can get a good receiver round 2, round 3. I mean, it happens. It happens every draft. I mean, we got Michael Thomas in a second. I mean, this year we saw Ladd McConkey go in a second. I mean, there's always good receivers in that second and third round.
Right.
Let me ask y'all. Let me ask y'all this on the pick 9th, I believe. Any way a quarterback's taken, and I know what we just discussed, but is there just any way or no way?
In the first round?
I'm going to go in the first round, yeah. If let's just say they cut Carr, is it possible or no?
No, I don't. No. I don't see that.
Okay,
I don't see it.
Tim, is it almost like a spot where the first 2 guys, Ward and Sanders, are going to be gone? Yeah. And to me, me and Chris talk. I've been a big Jackson Dart guy for 2 years, but there's no way you could take him at 9. That's my thing. That's a huge reach. You know what I'm saying? He's a guy I'm trying to get early in the second, maybe trade back in the first if you want to go that route. But I mean, 9 just feels like it's untouchable for QB to me, guys. I don't know. I think it's too early, for him, and you're not going to have those other guys available.
Yeah, I think that the Saints organization, they like Spencer Rattler. If they was to cut Derek Carr, they like him enough in order for them to try to build something with him. And I feel like it's a kind of a win-win situation for the New Orleans Saints. Like if you roll with Rattler. Now hear me out. Now this is a 5th round pick number 150 in last year's draft. If he ends up living up to his potential, you got yourself a Brock Purdy situation where you can actually start building your team and you don't have to worry about somebody dominating a cap. I mean, you have a couple of years where you can actually fix this football team and become a legit contender, right? But if it doesn't work out, then guess what? 2026, I mean, a much better quarterback class. You got Garrett Nussmeier, you got Arch Manning coming out, you got the quarterback out of Penn State. I mean, so you got a lot of talented players that can play that quarterback position. So to me, you can find your diamond in the rough this year, or you can find your diamond in the rough next year. So
you almost giving yourself that extra opportunity, like you're putting more, lottery balls in the pot, basically.
Right. Exactly.
Dave, and I like that too. I mean, Chris, a guy like I always talk to Chris about this too. Like, is there a guy you look at, and I guess I call it the secondary quarterback market, maybe a backup on a current team that's maybe mid-20s, something like that. I know we're not going to be able to, like I said, we're limited with cap space, but is there a guy like on another team? I know, Chris, you're big on Joe Milton. We've talked about like Hendon Hooker, Davis Mills. Is there like a guy like that you think if the Saints do move on from Carr, do you think they bring a guy like that in to kind of compete with Spencer Rattler?
Yeah, and I think he played for the Eagles. It actually is 2. It's going to be Tanner McKee or Kenny Pickett, one or the other, like somebody like that. Somebody. Look, I think that Kellen Moore, the way that he's going to structure this coaching staff as well as this team, I think he's going to get individuals that he can trust, that he has seen play and feel like he can actually do something with. So I think that you'll probably go with a Tanner McKee, someone that he worked with, a Kenny Pickett, so maybe somebody like that he can, maybe compete with, to try to make things interesting. I don't think that you're going to get Hendon Hooker. I think that Detroit Lions look at him as the future. He's talented. I mean, he dealt with that ACL injury, and he had to kind of work through that. But I mean, during the time where he had opportunities, you can see those flashes. So I don't think they're going to be quick to kind of give him up. And as far as Joe Milton, I think that would be a good selection, because I think that you don't want that looming over the head of Drake May, because he has that talent, man, and it's not something that people can avoid. Like when he's out there, like he's exciting. So I look for them to possibly move Joe Milton just to try to keep Drake May's confidence up, because
like a mental move almost.
Because if he starts struggling, that's when people gonna start clamoring for Joe Milton. So you want to make sure that you give him that complete confidence.
I like that, man. And then you put in another, like I said, then it's another lottery ball in there, basically. You're making your chances. And I mean, I like that in a way, like Chris, we talk about how, man, they have to nail this draft. I mean, it almost feels like that if they could do like a 2006 or 2017 or something even close to that, it'd be great. So like I said, if you could take quarterback out the equation, by the way we're talking, going that route, that'd be great. Not having to reach for a QB or use a pick on a QB, get more skill position guys, more trench guys, and not just, have to put so much pressure on a young rookie quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love Joe Milton's one of my favorite quarterbacks, and the way that the NFL is going with playmaking dual threat quarterbacks, him, Justin Fields, and I'm still a fan of Malik Willis, and I'm glad that he got out of Tennessee, went to Green Bay, and he started balling out with a team that knew how to use him instead of that ground and pound offense in Tennessee, the way they were using them out there. I love those guys, and I think they're all obviously they're relatively young and can start on any NFL team. But I don't know, man. The Saints are going to be interesting to see on that quarterback position. I ultimately think it's Rattler. That's where I'm going, Dave. I know you're. I
just got to see more, man. Look. I'm not ready to this kid. You got to let him develop. I want to see some things get better with him. But like you said, Tim mentioned, he is a 5th round pick, so there's a lot of work.
Right.
And maybe Kellen Moore's the kind of guy, like you said, the Brock Purdy effect, having like a Kyle Shanahan type of guy. Because let's be real, Clint was new to the system last year. He was, first time OC. And I mean, let's be real, Dennis Allen, it was all over the place, guys. It wasn't like he walked into a Sean Payton Saints team. You know what I mean?
Right,
so
right.
Year 2 might be a little more of a smoother transition into, playing quarterback, having a former quarterback there with him, and depending on who we bring in as OC.
Yeah.
Well, I also don't think it was fair to really judge Rattler. And I know we've talked about this, but I don't think it's fair to judge him when your head coach was a special teams guy. He had a defensive guy that wasn't a very good head coach. He had a new offensive coordinator. He had hardly any wide receivers. I think Kamara was hurt sometimes. Some offensive linemen were hurt. That's difficult to ask a 5th round rookie coming in there to just ball out, and everyone thinks he was going to be the next CJ Stroud, and that's just not, or Bryce or whatever. Well, Bryce Young's first games were horrible, but I mean, just to ask that of him is just not fair. And I think now with a little bit more stability, I think you're going to see a better Rattler. That's my opinion. That's my opinion.
I think sometimes, Chris, people fall in love with the narrative and they don't even realize it. Like, you subconsciously fall for the narrative. The narrative is that you had a kid who was the top-rated quarterback going to the University of Oklahoma, and people were comparing him to Patrick Mahomes.
Agreed.
And people seeing that arm talent, people seeing him making all these difficult throws, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, he ends up getting benched for Caleb Williams, goes to South Carolina, and then all of a sudden he becomes that 5th round pick, and everybody it goes back to that rookie season, that freshman season at Oklahoma, and everybody's like, man, you know what, man, hey, man, we got something, and people are looking at him that way. But there's a reason why he was a 5th round pick. Like, these scouts get paid a lot of money to make sure that they get the right quarterbacks in the room. It's not a mistake that they waited 5 rounds to select Spencer Rattler. I mean, he's a work in progress, and I think people need to understand that. But I do agree with you. I don't think you should evaluate him the way you would evaluate a rookie quarterback, because look at the circumstance. I was looking at an interview with Tom Pelissero, and he was talking about how the Saints organization is high on Spencer Rattler, and he said he was at the Green Bay game where they didn't score a point, and they asked how was Spencer Rattler doing. He asked, and the coach said, "Well, he got to meet his receivers tonight." He said, "Other than that, he's fine." So
yeah.
I mean, it's kind of hard for you to evaluate a player like that, right? So I say give him an opportunity, but I do agree, Dave. He is a work in progress, but I just think that Saints fan needs to be patient because he's not Patrick Mahomes.
Right. And I like bringing in the like you said, a Joe Milton or whoever. I like bringing that in. And look, if Rattler really elevates his game and he takes that job, then hey, man, I think that's going to spell good things in the future. And if he doesn't, I mean, hey, who knows? I mean, maybe it's a Kenny Pickett or Joe Milton or somebody that comes in here. Like you said, I like having the options. This is a fun time because things are going to change, and it's going to take a little bit of figuring out. And I like that. It's going to make these preseason games really fun to watch in August. And look, man, let's be real. This season started out so awesome, and then it became like a snooze fest after the halfway point of the year. We're just waiting for it to end, kind of like the Pelicans right now, man. I'm a big Pelicans fan. I'm just waiting for freaking for the draft balls to land. You know what I mean? To see what we pick. I mean, it's like it's hard to watch at this point, knowing where you are. But as a Saints fan, I think even if it's a terrible season record wise, there's still going to be a lot to look forward to with all the changes that are coming.
Yeah, but if they bring in Joe Milton, I'll tell you this. It's going to be exciting to watch. And we do know Kellen Moore knows what to do with a dual threat quarterback. We've seen what he did with Jalen Hurts. So there's that.
I like it, man. And like I said, nothing against Rattler, but I would not mind seeing Milton come in and at least compete. You know what I mean? Right. It'd be fun.
I want to ask both of y'all this. I want to touch on this. We're talking a little bit about Carr and Mickey Loomis, and I had to write this down real quick. But how much decision will I guess how much decision will that prove for Kellen Moore that will have to implement? Man, I'm messing all this up. I'm sorry, guys. I will edit that. How much say-so will Kellen Moore have on this roster if Mickey Loomis does cut Carr? Do you think that's because Kellen Moore has said or mentioned something, or is just Carr not Kellen Moore's guy? I know when a lot of new head coaches take over a team, they're usually inheriting a quarterback that wasn't theirs. So, I mean, would that prove that this is a new Mickey Loomis, a new Saints team, I guess?
I mean, look, he better, he better have some type of, leeway or some autonomy when it comes to Derek Carr. Look, man, I mentioned at the top of this show, when you are looking for a coach and you couldn't really find one, you finally got one. I'm pretty sure there was going to be some things that you were going to have to do. Like, I'm pretty sure that coach has some suggestions about, what he would like to bring to the table and what he would like for you to do. Kellen Moore knows what he wants to do with Derek Carr. Like, he may not come out and say it, but he knows.
Okay.
Right.
And these guys, when they're trying to get these coaching jobs, they know from the jump if they're going to keep this quarterback or they're not, or they're going to try to find a way to try to bring their guy in. Like, we seen this with Sean Payton. Like, Sean Payton was not a fan of Russell Wilson, right?
Yeah,
he was not.
Right.
And what did they do? They ate that $50 million cap, and he went and got Bo Nix, and Bo Nix was able to ball out. They sent Russell Wilson to the Steelers. I mean, that's just the way that it goes. Right. So he knows what he wants to do. And Mickey should get out of the way. If Kellen Moore wants Derek Carr, then let him have Derek Carr. If he feels like he needs to go in a different direction, let him go in a different direction. It's no different than when they end up cutting Jameis Winston when he was a Sean Payton guy. And it should be no different that Derek Carr was a Dennis Allen guy. So you got to allow these coaches to coach the way that they want to. And you got to be able to grin and bear it at times and believe in the guy that you actually brought in to make the right decision.
Right. I guess the reason why I kind of bring that up is, as we were talking before the show, Tim, I'm a big Texan guy. Mm-hmm. I just feel sometimes this kind of runs parallel to when the Texans hired David Culley. And I don't know if you remember that or not, but they hired David Culley. He was one year and he was gone.
1 year guy. Yep. One and done.
And he had a horrible roster. Deshaun wanted out. I mean, the Texans were going through everything worse possible, you could go through. So I guess that's why I kind of ask that a lot, is because I feel sometimes, we kind of touch on it, that Kellen Moore
Right.
But do you think that Kellen Moore has been set up to succeed for the long haul? And do you think the Saints will allow him? I guess that would be a better way to phrase that. Do you think the Saints will allow him, 4 years maybe? Because I don't think this is going to be anything, this isn't going to be fixed in 1 year, 2 years. I think it's going to need more and more time.
And it's Loomis's fault, honestly. I mean, he's got a lot to do with
why
it. It's not going to be a 1 year turnaround,
Yeah. That's why I'm saying, do you see that as like, is Loomis really willing to change by letting Carr go? Because he's stuck his neck out for Dennis Allen, comparing Dennis Allen to Tom Landry in a press conference, which
that was crazy.
Sticking his neck out for Carr. I guess that's what I kind of really want to know. And in my opinion, I kind of feel like maybe they really are trying to change, you know what I mean? And turn the page. But just deep down, I just like, man, he's got so many cards stacked against him. That's why I say that. I mean, what are y'all thoughts?
Well, I think they're going to give him time. I think they're going to be patient with him. I don't think they're going to like try to fire him quickly. They're not going to use him as a scapegoat. Like David Cullum, he was a scapegoat. Lovie Smith, in certain cases, was a scapegoat. I think when it comes to Kellen Moore, I think that he's what you call an early arrival when I think about it. Now hear me out. All right. Now, Mickey Loomis, when the Saints went on that losing streak, he went on WWL radio and said that it was the injuries. That was the reason why they weren't having success. It wasn't Dennis Allen. And people were like, man, is he crazy? Is he insane? Like, you don't see what's going on? But hear me out. Now, what if Mickey Loomis was trying to keep Dennis Allen one more year? Because think about this. Think about how hard it was for the Saints to find somebody to replace him. But in 2026, the Saints are $60 million over the cap. So if he would have kept Dennis Allen one more year and they would have stunk, he would have fired Dennis Allen, more than likely. And then they would have been able to get a coach and it would have looked more appealing. You wouldn't have to worry about Derek Carr's contract because it would have been easier to get up off him. The Spencer Rattler situation, it probably would have been more apparent. So to me, I think Mickey Loomis was more upset when I think about it, was the fact that he probably knew that it was going to be a tough sale because of the situation. So that's the reason why he was trying to maybe like grin and bear it for another year with Dennis. But I don't think they're going to set Kellen Moore up, just to be the scapegoat. I think that they're going to give him the patience. And I think that it's understood that it's not going to be an easy fix. And I think that Kellen understands that, as well as the Saints organization. But I think that maybe he was a little bit of an early arrival. But I think that the Saints turning the page from Dennis Allen and Derek Carr was inevitable. It was just a matter of maybe a year earlier than it was supposed to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like you said, it almost feels like, in a way, like you said, you knew deep down he didn't want to fire Dennis Allen the way he did midseason. It felt like pressure from the fan base and just the media in general. It felt like he caved in eventually to that. And to me, I think, we're going to get a good idea of where they want to go. And like you said, I think they want to go that route by letting him establish his own identity. But, I mean, you got two post-June 1st cuts that we've talked about on other podcasts. And to me, like you said, if Taysom Hill's one of those names, and if it's Derek Carr or Tyrann Mathieu or even a Cam Jordan, then that to me, that tells you everything you need to know about the direction they're trying to go, and they're going to allow Kellen Moore that 3 to 4 years to make this thing happen rather than putting pressure to turn around in 1 or 2 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
I want to ask you this too, because me and Chris talk about Carr a lot. Do you think? I mean, it would come down. You think there's a team out there that realistically, and I'm not saying there is or isn't, but is there a team that realistically would trade for Derek Carr, give up a late round pick or something like that, get him at a discount, and, we save a little cap money there as opposed to making him a post-June 1st cut and using that on somebody else? Do you think there's any team that's interested out there?
I mean, the only team I could think about is, the Jets. You got to hope Aaron Glenn can do you a solid, like
Right.
somebody. But other than that, like, no, I don't. I don't feel like
I mean,
that.
they pursued Carr before the whole Rodgers thing. I
Right.
want to say originally,
Right.
right? So
Yeah, they did. Yeah, I mean, it was between the Saints and the Jets, and he decided to go with Dennis Allen and the Saints. But yeah, that would be the only team. I mean, I look around the landscape of the National Football League. I just think that it's going to be tough. Now, we know that the NFL draft, sometimes teams feel like they can get a certain player in a certain round, and sometimes that doesn't happen, and maybe the phone starts to ring there. But I look at it. I look at his contract. I look at what the Saints are pretty much, dealing with. He has a no trade clause. Like, he has to agree to go to the team that the Saints sent him to. So you have that going for you. So, or against you, I should say. But that's the only team, the Jets. I mean, you think about them moving on from Aaron Rodgers, where they're picking. They're not going to be able to get that succession plan. I mean, unless Jordan Travis ends up like turning the corner and end up like healing from that injury. I forgot he was on the team, but he was pretty talented. Yeah. So I mean, you have that, but other than that would probably be the only team. Anything else, it would probably just be Derek Carr, being released by the Saints and being picked up by a team to maybe compete with a younger guy and be that backup. So I don't see any other way other than Aaron Glenn calling you up and saying, "Hey, I got a deal for y'all. What you think?"
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, especially when you figure it, like, man, you look at a team. Let's just say they want to experiment with quarterback and punt, drafting a quarterback to 2026 because they don't love the class or who's going to be available after Warren Sanders. Like, to me, I'm just looking at the situation. I mean, Justin Fields would be a lot more appealing at 25. That would come a lot cheaper probably than Derek Carr. You know what I mean? Like, why would a team pass on that for a guy in his mid-30s who you kind of know who he is at that point? You know what I mean? Like, Fields would be kind of intriguing to me if I was a team that wanted to kind of tinker around at quarterback as opposed to Derek Carr,
Right.
Agree.
Yeah.
What about the Giants? What about the Giants and Derek Carr? I kind of heard that a little bit a few weeks ago. No way.
I think they're going to end up getting Cam Ward or Shadir Sanders. So if you look at the way that the draft is structured, I mean, I know that, Tennessee, they've been talking about both quarterbacks, but Abdul Carter has been rising up the draft boards. I mean, he's a freakish athlete, and do you want to pass that? But I think that the Giants are probably going to end up getting one of these quarterbacks. I'd be shocked if they don't. So I think if that's the case, then there's no need for Derek Carr. But if they don't, if those teams end up losing out, like the Giants, let's just say Shadur goes 1 and Cam Ward, goes 2, like vice versa. Then maybe they have to make that phone call to the Saints. So
that's good point. Yeah, and Tennessee, like you said, it's almost like, do you just run Levis out there for one more year, like you say, add a generational talent with Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter or whoever, and just take one more flyer on Levis, who's probably not going to be the guy, but that's another team too that could add like a Fields or somebody like that and just make it a competition this year. You know what I mean? So I could see them going another round, like you said, Sanders or Ward falling into the laps of the Giants. And I'll tell you, man, like, look, you play dynasty football. If you're Malik Neighbors guy and have him on your dynasty team, you are praying for either, Shadur Sanders or Cam Ward to make that team, man.
Yeah. So what you're saying, Tim, if I'm reading you right, you're saying the Browns are definitely not taking a quarterback and sticking with Watson.
Well, I mean, Watson's not playing, but I'm not sure.
No way.
I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility, but
isn't it the hardest team to mock draft in the top 5? I would think.
Man.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't feel like there's a quarterback that's out there right now. I feel like you're going to be in the same situation. It's not because of these guys' talent. I just think that certain teams, when they draft quarterbacks, I mean, it just doesn't work out for some reason. Like the Jets are one, and the Browns are another. It's like, look at Baker Mayfield. Like Baker Mayfield, like he looked like he shouldn't have been in the league playing for the Browns. But look at him now. And he's won like 3 straight NFC South championships. So it's like
And the Jets draft guys like Mark Sanchez, you know what I mean?
Right. I mean,
Sam Darnold.
Look what Sam Darnold did in Minnesota. You know, I mean,
That's
look what
crazy.
Geno Smith did done in Seattle.
Yeah, that's
I forgot about that.
Yeah, definitely.
I forgot about that.
So
I still say Cleveland ruined Johnny Manziel's career, but
Chris is a Manziel lifer.
I'm a big Manziel guy. I am.
that and vodka. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, yes, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Exactly.
You're right. Let me ask y'all this too. What players do you think the Saints actually cut? I mean, obviously we've talked about Derek Carr, but is there anybody else that the Saints just absolutely like shocking? Like Cam Jordan. Is that possible? Is that a possibility?
Man, that's the one. I don't know, Tim. You want to take that? Because look, we all love Cam. The production's fallen off the last couple of years, but it feels like just who he is, like that coach in the field factor. I feel like, what he does off the field and how big he is in the community, it feels like they're going to keep him around. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'd be shocked if they go that route. I mean, Taysom, we've talked about that. That's another kind of shocker, but given his age and the injury, it's a little expected at this point. But I don't know, man. I think there's going to be some definite cuts coming around, obviously. But,
yeah,
I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, I could see – and look, there's another guy. We all love him. We know him well, for obvious reasons. But Tyrann Mathieu, I mean, you move on from Tyrann Mathieu at this point. I think you could save like roughly $7 million by cutting him after June 1st. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I wouldn't be shocked by anybody being cut. Like I look around his team. I'm like, I don't see anybody that I would just say, oh, he just needs to be here. Like,
like he's safe.
They just solely on like who those people are. Like that's the only way that you can actually talk them into the room about how great of humanitarians they are. But we're not talking about like winning a lifetime achievement award or something like that. Like we talking about winning football games, and if we was doing it based on that, then trust and believe these guys should be lifers. But look, I look at Cam Jordan. He's the face. He's the face of the franchise. He's one of the greatest New Orleans Saints players of all time. To me, I feel like he's probably going to end up staying because you need somebody in that locker room to get these young players on board, like to be able to buy in. And he's a Saint through and through. Like there's been times where Cam Jordan could have left the team, could have asked for more money, could have been like, I don't want to take a pay cut, like some players that I know.
It's like a loyalty factor, right?
Yeah,
like a certain loyalty thing.
Yeah. So I just think that you need somebody like that. Like, but if it came down to him and Demario Davis to who to stay, who to leave, I'll probably keep based on the buy-in and what you need players to buy in. I would say Cam, but if we're talking about production and buy-in, it would be Demario because Demario still has something left in the tank. He still flashes off the screen. Yeah. Not so much Cam, these days as much as he used to. So, but I just think that those two guys are probably going to be the toughest. Derek Carr, I'm sorry, it's probably not going to be as tough as people think. Taysom, that might be a tough decision, but it's probably going to be necessary. And Tyrann Mathieu, he's a hometown guy, but I think that he might be in that shuffle as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah.
DeMario, I agree. Like you said, it's so hard to move on from DeMario and Cam. That's what Chris and I had this conversation off the air a couple of days ago, and I said, man, it's just what they bring. And DeMario, like you said, dude, was he 36 and he's still playing at a ridiculous level. So I mean, he's going to make guys around him better. I mean, like I was telling Chris, let's just say you have young linebackers in that room besides Pete Warner, whoever you bring in maybe in the draft this year. I mean, he's such an important guy to have around.
Yeah.
Is there any way that the Saints do anything crazy with Alvin Kamara? Is he traded or cut or no? Or he stayed?
No, I don't see that.
Okay.
I think he's going to be really, man, like he's an integral part to, whatever quarterback takes over this year. He's like, I mean, the fact that he can catch 80 passes in a year, he's a good blocker. He can run, obviously he's got 1,000 yards in him if he gets the carries, you know what I mean? So, to me, Alvin, man, is just it's too hard to move on from him. I mean, if Kendre Miller, I like Kendre. Me and Chris have talked about Kendre. I just haven't seen Kendre stay healthy enough. If Kendre showed me a little more, then maybe you start thinking some things. But I think you got to have Alvin in the building, man. Yeah,
I think Alvin is one of those players that you build a team around. Like, I mean, we kind of had the same type of talk about Saquon Barkley. I mean, his history of being injured with the Giants and, them never really fixing their offensive line. But He goes to a team that has a solidified offensive line, and the rest is history. And then also, I mean, we got to take into account the first 2 weeks of the season. I mean, I know it was like ancient history, but man, when that offensive line was rolling, I mean, Alvin looked like he was 2018 Alvin, 2019. Yeah. So there's still something there. You just got to be able to fix that offensive line. That's why I said earlier, you know, you might want to build through the trenches, because if Alvin can get some space along and be accompanied by somebody like that can stay healthy, that can be that thunder to his lightning, I think that you can have something. I mean, look around the National Football League. Like you normally have that 1-2 punch, that guy that can be that change of pace. I mean, we see what David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are doing out there in Detroit. And what have made the Saints so successful, that thunder and lightning dynamic. Pierre Thomas, Reggie Bush. Then after that, you know, it was Pierre and Darren Sproles, and you know, like they always had that 1-2 punch. Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. So I just think that they need that guy. I don't know if Kendra can stay healthy enough to be that guy, but there's some talented running backs that are in this draft, man. I mean, you got Cam Scatterboo out there. You know, he played really well, made a name for himself. Ollie Gordon out there at Oklahoma State, big physical 225-pound running back, and also Judkins from Ohio State. So
I like him.
You got some talented guys that can be that 1-2 punch along with Alvin Kamara. So that's what I would say. Make sure that you build that offensive line so Alvin can run wild.
Yeah. And when you say to Alvin, you know, Chris and I had this conversation a lot with Kamara, even though he's around that 30-year-old area. Sean Payton's offense, the fact that he never has running backs that go for 300 carries, you know, he's always got that 2 or 3-headed monster almost in the backfield. I think it kind of helped Alvin stay fresher and be better late in his career, you know, because he didn't have those huge carry seasons early on like some running backs do. You know, his mileage was kind of a little bit further down, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I mean, we used to hear that all the time from Mark Ingram when he was in the league. He said, you know, he was 20, like at the time he was like 29. He said, I'm like, feel like I'm about 26 or 27 because, you know, I used to shed a backfield. I mean, and honestly, I feel like that's the reason why when he left New Orleans and he went to Baltimore, I mean, he had 14 total touchdowns that year. So
had a big season.
So I think that played a huge role. So Alvin still have a lot of left in the tank because of the way that Sean Payton utilized him early in his career.
Yeah. Let me ask y'all this too. Olave. What happens to Olave? Is he traded or does he stay? I say that because I just read reports that I think there was like a fantasy trade or whatever that the Jets would you know, obviously try and make a play for Olave. You think that happens or no?
And you know, it's funny, Tim. I want to preface to kind of give you a little background. I've been hard on Olave, all right, and it's not because I don't like Olave. I feel like I'm like that fan that I see something in the guy, but I feel like maybe I don't know if it's a mental thing or him just staying healthy. I just feel like he hasn't taken himself to the next level that I believe that he could reach one day. You know, and it's kind of frustrating to watch because I feel like, hey, this guy's got all the tools. He shows some flashes where he looks like a superstar out there, but then it's like, you know, some plays where he maybe pulls up short on a route or he doesn't make a play in traffic or doesn't protect himself, you know, going over the middle. Sometimes it's not all his fault. You know, it's maybe a hospital ball there, you know, here and there. But, I mean, I don't know. I feel like Olave, it's like you got to make a decision soon, I think, on him the way his contract's coming up soon, you know, as that rookie deal comes to an end.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a little bit of a tougher decision than maybe what people think.
Yeah. Look, I'm pretty critical of Chris Olave too. Like I look at Chris Olave as a number one just for the simple fact of he's the best receiver on the team. Like it's not because like I feel like if I'm looking at number one receivers, like I'm gonna just point to him first. Like he reminds me a lot of Brandon Cooks. Like Brandon Cooks was like on paper the number one receiver for the Saints, but I mean there was a lot that he left on the field, in my opinion. Like he would catch the ball like because he was faster than everybody, but he rarely got yards after the catch. He didn't make anybody miss. And that's kind of what you have with Chris Olave. Like Chris Olave, he's like that, you know, that brandy at the bar. You know what I'm saying? He's at the top shelf, you know what I'm saying? But it's like there's a higher shelf up there, you know what I'm saying? It's the real good stuff right there. And I feel like that's what's missing. Like the DK Metcalfs, the AJ Browns, like those big physical guys. Michael Thomas. Like Michael Thomas wasn't the fastest receiver in the world, but he would get off the line, off brute strength alone, make people miss. Like he had 149 receptions, and this guy run like a 4.6. So you don't have to be, have blazing speed. I just think that there's something missing, and I honestly feel if the New Orleans Saints, let's just say for example, if they was to draft Trey Harris out of Ole Miss, 6'3", 215, about probably 220. If they was to draft him, I think that he'll become the number one receiver. It's kind of the same way with Michael Thomas. Like Michael Thomas, like you mentioned, Dave, was a second round pick. They had Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks was the number one guy. Right. What did Michael Thomas do? He made Brandon Cooks expendable. They traded him
1 year in, 1 year into 1 year in, basically.
Yeah. So I think that, but like just for the simple fact of he's the best receiver on the team, and even like sometimes that's even a stretch because Rashid Shaheed sometimes outplays him.
We've talked about that a bunch of times. I said at times like you feel like Shaheed maybe one more year if he could stay healthy, could he just supplant him as the true number one? You know what I mean?
Let me ask y'all this, okay? Like let's just say this, okay? I feel like this: if I got a second guess, if you're a number one, you're not a number one.
I agree.
Like think about AJ Brown, is he a number one?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, the Nico Collins, is he a number one?
Yeah.
Yes. No doubt, right? Like you don't even have to think about it, right? Because so if I say like Chris, like if I say Jordan Addison, like not yet, you know what I'm saying? Like he has talent, like
he does.
But he's not a number one. Like Chris Olave is like he's good, but I would pick other wide receivers over him. Like that's just the way that it goes, man. He just leaves. I agree with you, Dave. I've been very critical, and a lot of people like give me flack about it, but look, I don't see dominance. Like I don't see dog mentality. It's a switch.
That's the best. I've used that expression on another podcast a ton of times early last season. I said, man, I don't see like the Amon-Ra St. Brown dog or Michael Thomas when he was healthy. I don't see that with him. I don't see a guy just owning somebody's draped all over him. I don't see him making those consistent competitive catches, if that makes any sense. Like you said, the yards after the catch, physicality. I don't think the way we made that trade on draft day.
There you go. I was going to get that. I
hate that trade. That's one of my things I hated the most since Sean Payton left. I'm wanting, like, you better be Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. Like you said, a dominant true one, A.J. Brown. That was way too crazy of a trade for a guy that had all the what ifs, you know what I mean, who had talent but didn't, to me, jump out at you as one of those guys.
Yeah, crazy thing about it is if they would have drafted Jameson Williams or Garrett Wilson, we're not even having this conversation. Like you will automatically know who the number one is because like they just wired different. And I honestly feel like if the Saints were to draft like another wide receiver and he ends up like living up to the potential and being that Michael Thomas type receiver for them, I don't think Chris Olave would care. Like I honestly don't feel like he would care or get upset about it. Yeah. He'll be okay with it.
And that's weird too, because like you said, that alpha receiver has to have a certain type of personality. And I just don't know if he has it,
Right.
I think he was hyped. I think a lot of that was hyped up too with that trade. I agree with that. I agree that trade really hyped his value up, and he was just kind of always he's just a big letdown in my opinion. He just was never that alpha dog. But yeah, I agree. Interesting though. Interesting. Talk about a little bit of, I know we kind of touched on the draft, but Timothy Day, what are they taking at 9? Obviously, you mentioned offensive linemen, but is there anything else outside of the offensive linemen and defensive line? I don't know. Shoot, anything?
I think with a new coach, I think that they would allow him to try to make a statement. I wouldn't be surprised if they go offensive side of football. Okay. So don't be surprised. Like, don't be surprised if Ashton Genty name doesn't come up. Like, or like, like I said, McMillan, which I feel like it was a stretch because he got too many teams that need play of his ability. But yeah, I think they're gonna go offense. I think they're gonna, wouldn't be surprised if they go Ashton Genty. Wouldn't be surprised if they go offensive lineman or maybe like another really talented offensive player like Tyler Warren out of Penn State, the tight end. So
I've seen that on a few mocks, man. That kind of shocked me. But then again, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, man, you know what? Brock Bowers. You know what I'm saying? This
Yeah,
Brock Bowers.
exactly. You was close. You was close.
Yeah, it's like,
I've seen comps. I've seen comps of him to like a Rob Gronkowski. I forgot what website that was, but considering that Saints need a tight end, I was actually going to ask that. So Tyler Warren, cool.
Oh, they were going to draft him. Like they basically went on record and said that they said we thought Bowers was going to be there. Then the Raiders took him, so we were happy that for August. So they said it, like they were going to draft Brock Bowers, but that's kind of crazy. You think about it, like the Saints were always like one pick away from like this generational talent. Like Patrick Mahomes was like pick a pick before Lattimore, and then you got Brock Bowers who was picked before Tallahassee. But I mean, just in both situations, I think both teams won. I mean, Lattimore, in my opinion, is the greatest cornerback in Saints history.
Oh yeah, it's not even close.
Generational talent, and I think Tallahassee is going to be a cornerstone for the Saints on the offensive line. So.
He's one of the few things I'm certain about on his team going forward, if that makes any sense. Fuaga, I think he owns that spot, you know.
Right. No doubt.
Do you, and this is kind of a fun one here, but me and Dave talk about this all the time because I think this is one of the most pivotal times in Saints history was when they traded up, and you know where I'm going with this, Dave. They traded up, and when everyone thought they were going to go draft the quarterback by the name of Lamar Jackson, talk to me about that. Like, what do you feel? I feel it was one of the worst decisions ever, and it's almost in a weird way kind of set them back a little bit by not taking that quarterback to sit underneath Breeze. What do you think, man?
I will never forget this night as long as I live. Look, I'm gonna tell y'all. Like I've told this story several times on my podcast. So I'm at Planet Fitness, right? I'm on the treadmill, and I'm like, okay, let me get on this treadmill. And by the time I'm done, the Saints, they'll be the pick because they were supposed to pick a little bit later. So all of a sudden, I'm looking and like the Saints are on the clock.
Yeah.
I stopped. I was like really dialed in. And then all of a sudden I stopped. I'm like, they about to pick. I can't believe they about to pick Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
I stood in front of the TV. I'm sweating like I'm about to get drafted.
Yeah.
I looked at the screen. I'm like, they picked Marcus Dapp. I'm like, first off, I was like, who?
Who the hell?
I was like, who is this?
Right.
And I was floored. Like you couldn't tell me. Like even the draft prognosticators, they were like, they gotta go with Lamar Jackson here. They gotta take Lamar. They're taking Lamar. Everybody thought they were gonna take Lamar. Then when I heard Davenport, I got my bag out of the locker room and I just left. I was just like, man, I can't believe this, man. Yet again, another 6'6" long wingspan guy that y'all just trying to make Cam Jordan. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, look, me and Chris have had this. I've tried to play devil's advocate on it a bunch, and like I tell him, I said, of course I want Lamar Jackson. Hindsight would definitely tell me that, and at the time, it told me that. You know what I mean? But I told Chris, I said, I looked at where we were coming off of that year before, and I said, man, we were expected to be contenders, and I said, to me, I guess I wouldn't have had the problem, but when you did it so much, you traded up, you put so much into it, and you trade up to get a guy from UTSA who the average person had no idea who this dude was. You know what I mean? And I know we needed help on defense, but I think it was the fact that it was Davenport, man. And no offense to the guy. I mean, he had a little talent. Injuries have always been obviously a bugaboo for him, but it felt like if you would have nailed a defensive player there, it wouldn't have felt so bad. But the fact that it was Davenport, it made it so much worse. The fact he could never stay healthy, the tenure here wasn't great, it just made it worse. Like if we had a stud defensive player like along the lines of a Marshawn Lattimore, I think it would have maybe kind of softened the blow of not getting Lamar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you get like what really can frustrate a Saints fan when you think about it is they didn't even need him because the year before that you had Trey Hendrickson.
And that's it's like somebody.
Damn, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like nobody saw that this guy had 15 sacks possibly. Wow. You know what I mean?
That's crazy. I didn't even know that.
The 17 draft, dude. That's look. I tell Chris this all the time. I say I don't care what any writer says or what they publish. That 17 draft was the best draft of the 21st century by any team. I stick by it.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's hard. It'd be hard pressed to try to find another draft class that even get close to that. Seriously.
Yeah.
Well, the
And
Bengals and Lions.
all the arguments we had, I haven't used Trey Henderson. All the debates me and him had, like, I'm like, hey, dude, I get it.
Good.
This is maybe what they were thinking. I never even used the Trey Henderson thing.
Yeah, that's putting salt right into that wound right there. Oh, man. See, I was a big advocate for that. I thought for sure the Saints would have taken Lamar Jackson. Their franchise was fixing to go into a new era. I mean, what if, coulda, shoulda. But, man, I always think about that night for sure. We always discuss that, man.
And I thought Drew would never – we always kept thinking, hey, man, Drew's like him and Brady going to play in their mid-40s, and then Drew started having the injuries in 19 and 20. And, I kept thinking to myself, I'm like, of course we'd love to have Lamar, but what if Drew plays 4 more years? What does that mean? You know what I mean? But looking back, of course, hindsight, everybody makes that move for Lamar 100 times out of 100. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, but you think about it. I mean, Drew, he even said this. This is documented. He said in 2016 he contemplated retirement. To me, I feel like the Saints should have looked at that as a wake-up call. Like, he's not going to play here forever. I feel like that's when you start like looking at the succession plan. Yeah. And I just think that they were just hoping and wishing that he comes back every single year. Like 2017, I can forgive you for the Kansas City Chiefs jumping in front of you and getting Mahomes. I mean, that happens, right? Yeah. But you also had in 2018, Lamar Jackson, you didn't get him. 2020, you had opportunity to get Jordan Love, you didn't. You also had opportunity to get Jalen Hurts, and you didn't. Yeah. So I mean, how many times like could a good quarterback play like slap you in the face and you just don't accept it? So to me, I feel like the Saints kind of put themselves in that position. I mean, their last grasp of hope was Teddy Bridgewater, but the thing, like Teddy Bridgewater was originally supposed to be the succession plan. The problem was he wasn't supposed to play in them 5 games and he went undefeated. So Carolina saw that and they signed him. The plan was Drew Brees to retire and Teddy Bridgewater to pick up the slack, you know what I'm saying, and kind of be that bridge guy, no pun intended. So it just kind of happened that way. But they had opportunities to draft Drew Brees' successor, and I just think that was just negligence on the organization's part, like trying to be committed to Drew, but at the same time, I mean, not really looking at a succession plan. I mean, you had to know that Drew wasn't going to play forever. Right.
And if he brought that, like you said, if he brought that up behind closed doors and said, hey, man, I might be, thinking about the end soon. And 2020, like you said, I think that's the one that doesn't get talked about enough. I mean, Lamar is Lamar, so of course that's going to get a lot of attention. But that Jordan Love thing, I think that was the year we drafted Cesar Ruiz, too. Like you said, very inconsistent guy who we gave an extension to already. In that same draft, I remember I first started doing podcasts. I was maybe a year in. We were doing some stuff with the guy Soul Saint and everybody. Oh, yeah. And I remember saying that day, I said, man, a guy I was really interested in, because that was right around the time of that first Alvin contract talk, when he was coming up for that new contract. I was wanting Jonathan Taylor. That I was saying, hey, man, just go get him. And if Alvin stays, you got the best running game in the league. I wanted Taylor that draft. But Jordan Love was a guy I remember just looking at and saying, hey, this dude's got a lot of potential. But we end up with Cesar freaking Ruiz. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't get it, man. A guy that's never – look, the way we drafted him there, he better have been like the next coming of Jari Evans for all the players that we passed up. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it hasn't gone that way.
And you also think about this, Dave. You think about like all of the conversations we're not privy to as the general public. Like, think about this. Like after the 2019 season, that's when the New Orleans Saints were like they were wondering if Drew Brees was going to come back at all. Like you remember that? So he made that tweet. He was on that high mountain, said, "Let's run it back again." Yeah. 2020, like, okay, you didn't know if he was going to come back. You had Jordan Love right there. Like, I thought the Patriots was going to draft. I really did. When the Patriots moved out of the first round, I was like, they about to get Jordan Love. You had 2 opportunities. You had Jordan Love and you had Jalen Hurts to replace Drew Brees, who you knew was playing in his final season. Yeah. And you still didn't draft.
Remember the Vikings game. You alluded to that earlier, the Taysom Hill performance in the Vikings game, because there was some fans, we were like watching that game like, hey, man, Drew is special, and as legendary as Drew is, let's just let Taysom play this fourth quarter at quarterback. It felt like we were all kind of saying that to a certain extent. Right. Yeah. And that, like I said, that should have been sign number 1 almost. Like, hey, it's coming, man. Like, it's that time almost, and
that's that loyalty, though, I think, what you guys were talking about in the very beginning. That's that loyalty the Saints, Mickey Loomis have to these players, and rightfully so. I mean, a lot of them are going to go into the Ring of Honor, like you mentioned, but man, it's just time to let go, man. You got to just turn that page and start fresh. Last thing Go ahead.
No, I was going to talk about your team, Chris. Like, think about this, right?
Man.
Okay, so you think about some of the commitments that Houston made, right? Deshaun Watson, he was playing pretty well. I mean, minus the controversial stuff, but man, he was a franchise quarterback and he was playing at a high level. But they traded him away, and a lot of people may not look at that as the best idea. They also, able to, trade and, make a deal. And, they get themselves the second and the third round pick. Now you have the cornerstone player on your offense, which is CJ Stroud, and on the defense, which is Will Anderson, right?
Yep.
I mean, people were ready to come down there with pitchforks and everything because Lovie Smith won that last game, right?
Listen.
But I mean, would you try as well as Bryce Young improved? Would you have traded Bryce Young for CJ Stroud at this point? No. I mean, the sky's the limit, and for both guys. So sometimes you got to make those tough decisions, man. Sometimes things got to get ugly before they get beautiful. So
you're right about that. Yeah.
I do agree. I agree. Talking about Houston for a minute, like when that played out, I'm looking. I've got a picture right here on my desk. I'm with my wife in my Deshaun Watson jersey because I've been a Texan fan since 2003. That's their first win against the Cowboys in 2002. Right. I've been a fan since 2003. Right. So quarterbacks, I don't know what those look like in Houston. I mean, the best one we've had was before Watson and before Stroud was Matt Schaub, right? Right. And I've been through some of the worst Brock Osweiler, TJ. Oh my God, I'm savage. I mean, I've been through it all. And then when the Deshaun Watson thing happened, I was legitimately crushed. Because for once in my life, we were there, Houston was there. And I'll never forget I want to say it's second game. I remember driving to work Monday morning, and I'm not kidding about this, as happy as could be. This guy just threw 3 touchdowns. He balled. He ran. I mean, dual threat, we're here, man. Houston's on the map now. And all of that just came crashing down. And I think a lot of that had to do with Bill O'Brien, who was a horrible head coach, and then even worse. Why they gave him GM powers was horrible.
He was your Dennis Allen, basically, man.
No. Listen. He traded away DeAndre Hopkins for a bag of potato chips and David Johnson. That's just horrible.
I remember that trade.
I have to really commend Caserio. Nick Caserio came in, he bubble wrapped Deshaun Watson. They talked, and I'm glad that they were both professionals about it. Nick was going to do the best he could for Houston, bubble wrap him up. Listen, we're not going to play you for a year. They got the best out of that situation, obviously. I would have loved – I thought we were going to get this humongous package. I was a little bummed with what we got in return because I was thinking we were going to get – 3 first-rounders, Denzel Ward. I'm asking for everything, and I was like, oh man, But I'm so glad it worked out the way it did. And last year, obviously, or this past year, this was just really all of Bobby Slowick's fault, in my opinion. I think he just never really progressed as an offensive coordinator and really stunted C.J. Stroud's growth. But I think the Texans are going to be fine. I think they're in a position where they have money. They've got a good draft right now, 25. They're going to I think they're going to probably draft a wide receiver. They're got to fix the offensive line somehow, especially the interior. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off on the Texans, but you get me going, bro, on the Texans.
Look, I completely understand. But like you said, I mean, they made some difficult decisions. Yeah, but they also put some individuals in executive roles for them to improve their football team. And as a Texan fan, you didn't understand that at first, right? I mean, you talked about your emotional connection to Deshaun Watson being at that time the best quarterback Houston has ever had. So that's the only thing that you can, you had. But I mean, sometimes you got to be able to go through the process and be able to trust the process. And it worked out great, and it continues to work out great. I mean, what happened? I mean, they were in the same position in CJ Stroud's first year. In his second season, they went to the divisional round, and I mean, they're going to improve. I still feel like you mentioned, the offensive line needs a little bit of work. I feel like the absence of Stephon Diggs, Robert Woods is getting a little bit up there in age. They need some little youth. And, I mean, God bless the brother, John Mechie. He's out there. Everybody knows his story. But, I mean, he hasn't really lived up to that hype, man, coming out of Alabama. So they have some pieces. I mean, Deco Collins definitely is the number one. I'm interested to see what the tight end position is going to be like. I know you have the young guy out of Ohio State. I think that he's okay. I like Schultz as well. But I think that you need somebody that's going to be able to be that number two for Nico Collins. I mean, and also that hamstring is a little bit of an issue to me as well. Yeah. Hopefully he can get through that, but that's an injury that has a tendency of kind of lingering around quite often throughout your career.
Yeah. I get a little nervous too with I'm a big Tank Dell guy. I love Tank Dell. Yeah. But he's so quick, but he is smaller. I mean, he's smaller framed. And that injury.
Yeah, it's hard to say what's going to come about.
Brutal injury. So I really hope they take at 25. I'd really hope they take what's the guy from Ohio State? Yes. I want him to take him at 25 with Collins, Dell. And I still think they may sign a wide receiver, possibly. Maybe if there's someone out there for cheap. I haven't dug too much in the wide receiver free agency, but I think they're going to get that situated, I think. So I think Houston will be fine.
Yeah.
But last thing before we tie it up, who, in both of y'all's opinions, if there's one player, one free agent the Saints sign, who is it and why? Simple. Don't worry about the cap. Don't worry about the cap or anything. Just who is it and who, why?
I'm gonna take an easy way out, Chris, real quick. I'll go. I want to see. I don't know if he's out there yet. I want to see when some cuts happen. Like we saw Raheem Mostert fall off the roster. I think there's going to be that guy. It's going to have to be a real subtle guy based on where we're at salary cap wise. I mean, I want to see these players. A few more, maybe a veteran. I would love, like we talked about earlier, a run stuffer. I mean, because I would just like a guy, a 29 on up kind of guy that you can get maybe a little cheaper than, say, a guy in his mid-20s. But somebody to come in and immediately fill that void as that run stuffer up front, man. I feel like we need that. I don't know who he is yet. Maybe as a cut candidate that happens, maybe there's somebody out there that falls into free agency that's cut because of a cap issue. But I feel like that's the kind of guy I'd like to get. Just somebody that could get in there and fill up some space on the defensive line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For me, I would have to say like maybe someone like Mekhi Becton. Like he's going to be a free agent, and the Saints do need a guard. Somebody that's going to help on the inside. So I would say him. I think that adding him to the offensive line could help. A veteran to come in to go alongside what they already have already. And also, I mean, this guy's been contemplating retirement, and I know he's a little bit up there in age. We've been talking about that, but Khalil Mack could also be somebody, especially if they bring in Brandon Staley, somebody that's familiar with him. So I'm just looking at it from, a salary standpoint and what the Saints are actually dealing with. I don't think that Khalil Mack would demand that much money at this point. It probably would be like something like a 1-year deal. But, you can be able to add him opposite of Carl Granderson, maybe a rotational guy. Maybe if you want to bring in another defensive player through the draft, you can, and he can provide some type of leadership in that aspect. But I would say most likely like Mekhi Becton because he's still relatively young, and the Saints desperately need help on the interior when it comes to their offensive line position.
Yeah, good call. We definitely got that void at guard, man. So that would be special to get somebody like him, man. I mean, he really peaked late in the year too, man. Like he got better and better. Yeah, man, he was a really high draft pick originally with the Jets. Huh?
Your first round draft pick. Yeah,
he was. Yeah, he just always he had the injury issue, but it's like, man, now it's like it came together for him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would play ball with that for sure, man. Anything that helps that offensive line.
Yeah.
You think they re-sign Chase Young real quick?
No.
No way.
Mm-mm.
No, I don't know if he did enough, Chris. Man, I just don't know. I don't think he had the impact we hoped that he would have.
He got better towards the end of the season. Like once they relieved the defensive line coach of his duties. Once Darren Rizzi became the interim coach, he played a little better. But Look, I mean, they call him the king of the almost sack. Like he almost gets to the quarterback every single time. But I mean, I just think that there's just something missing. You know, I like my defensive lineman to have a high motor. I just think sometimes he takes some plays off and he's not really that motivated. So I'm always questioning guys who have motivational issues. I mean, y'all remember like guy like Albert Hainsworth had all the talent in the world.
Oh yeah,
but would take some plays off, man, and didn't really live up to that potential.
Yeah, good call.
That's interesting. Well, man, I really appreciate it, Tim, for sure. Where can everybody find you at? Tell everybody about where they can find you at.
Well, I'm the host of the State of the Saints podcast. You can find the State of the Saints podcast on YouTube, youtube.com, search the State of the Saints podcast. And every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern on Bleacher Report, Saints Talk with Timothy J. Jones. We talk about some of the hottest topics pertaining to the New Orleans Saints. And also you can follow me on X at TJAY Jones 8.
Awesome, man. We really appreciate it.
Definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Thank y'all for having me, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. Thank y'all.
All right, guys.